In this lecture, we're going to be learning how to paint the ear. So let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and download this project so that you have this reference photo of the ear. And let's go ahead and add a new layer so we can paint on this. And what we want to do is using our color picker tool, because this is just a study, so we can color pick some colors from this reference, and then just make sure that you're paying attention to it over here in your color tray to make sure you know where it's coming from, so you start to become familiar with colors. But what we want to do is let's select one of these darker colors. So let's select this red color in here, and we're going to use that to draw in the outline for a drawing. So let's go ahead and bring our brush size down, and I'm just using a textured watercolor paintbrush, or you could use any type of brush that simulates simulates paint. All right, so I'm just looking at my reference, and I'm just copying some of these angles in here. I want to paint this about the same size. So I'm going to start with this outside shape. Maybe we could bring this in a little bit more. Go ahead and start working on this top part of the ear. So once you have the shape down, we want to start working on this outside folded over edge. So start drawing that in. And as you can see, I'm going to kind of exaggerate some of these angles in here. Make sure your brush is kind of thin. You don't want it too thick because we want to paint over all these lines. And so the thinner it is, the easier it's going to be to paint over. All right. So then we get kind of this bump right about here, which is this bump right there. Kind of curves around like this. Make sure that this is kind of all in line. We get this little guy that bumps out like that, and then kind of curves into this whole thing right there. So it's a little bit complicated, but if you just break it down into one part at a time, it's a little bit more simple. Right, then let's go ahead and do this part. So this curve around right there. If it doesn't match the exact shape and size, that's okay. All ears are slightly different, so don't worry too much if you're not capturing it exactly. Just want to make sure that each part of the ear is in there. I'm going to just kind of signify the shape of this part in the ear by drawing a light line like that. All right, great. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this ear. I'm just gonna move that up so we have it more in line. And let's go ahead and begin painting this in. So just like with our lips, what we wanna do first is let's add a color layer underneath it. So using my brush tool, I'm just gonna go ahead and color pick the darkest skin tone. So maybe something down here, something like that. See how that looks? That looks pretty good. So what we wanna do is we wanna bring our brush size up. And we just want to fill this in with the darkest skin tone. And then from there we can build up other highlights and colors and stuff on top of that. We can bring this paint out a little bit underneath the ear. We don't want it to come out too far. All right, perfect. So next, let's go ahead and let's merge these two. Actually, we can add a little bit of orange in there. So I'm going to select some of this orange. We can paint a little bit of this orange into where we see it in the photograph. So it's not a huge difference, but it's just going to add that undertone to our painting and help the colors along. Skin is translucent, so the more we can kind of layer those colors in, the more realistic it's going to look. So now what we want to do is let's go ahead and merge these two layers. So now our drawing layer and our color layer are all on the same layer. And then we can go ahead and we can start painting in more detail. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and let's select the next lightest color. So I'm going to select this color up here on the ear, somewhere around there. And then we can just start painting in wherever we see these lighter values that are about this color. So I can paint it across the top of the ear here. It kind of comes down here and then starts to fade out. kind of comes across this edge or ledge of the ear, like that. Get it going on down here as well. And to get these different details, make sure that you're constantly changing the size of your brush. Along this ledge here, like we can see right here in the photograph that we get that. Now it's a little bit brighter, so we're going to go back with brighter highlights at the end and really add in those final bright highlights, but for now we just want to kind of get this mid-tone highlight in there. Get some highlight in here as well. Some highlight up here. So I'm getting this highlight right there right now. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and let's grab some of this darker reddish orange color and let's start filling in some of these darker areas. So like up in here, for example, we can start to fill this in. So I just want to kind of copy the contour of the shadow that I see in the reference. Just kind of wraps around like this, and we'll come in with some colors to help blend that in and maybe add a little bit more orange in there. Again, remember that when you color pick your colors when you're doing studies, that you pay attention to where they're coming from over here in your color tray, and that's how one way that you're going to really learn about colors, especially in things like skin tones where the colors can get really complicated. But you can see that this is coming from basically pure red, and it's all the way over to the saturated side, but it's pretty dang dark. So like Austin said earlier in the course, typically, your shadows are going to be the most saturated thing. So when you're painting out of your head or your imagination, make sure that if you add shadows in, typically you're going to want to make those pretty saturated. So the darker they become, the more saturated they become. I'm going to go ahead and color pick this color right here. So you can see that that's a little bit lighter, but still pretty saturated. I'm going to add some to the edge of this shadow just to help add a warmer edge to it and also start blending it into that skin tone. Let's go ahead and select this color right here and kind of start blending that in. I'm going to go ahead and select this red right here, start painting this in. So just constantly looking back at my reference to make sure I'm painting it in the correct way. And then we get this orange that kind of wraps around this color, so I want to make sure that I capture that orange in there. Capture all this down here as well. All right, let's go ahead and soften this edge up a little bit by color picking this lighter brown, sort of orange color around it. Grab some of this orange, start painting it around here. I guess it's kind of more of a yellow. I'm going to select some of this orange out here and paint around the edge of this ear. Just constantly looking back. Just 50% of the time you should be looking back at your reference. That is how you're going to get really good at painting and drawing, is by constantly checking on your reference and making sure you're painting what's in the reference and not what you think you're seeing. So I'm just kind of looking around my reference and looking for areas where I notice little differences in color. So for example, I just picked some pink from right there because it looks kind of pink. There's a little bit of a pinkish orange color right there, so I'll paint some of that in. I'm gonna grab some of this reddish color around the ear right here. Try to paint some of that in. I'll reselect this darker red and kind of clean up that edge again. Select some of that pink, paint it in right there. Put this orange back over it. Now I'm just kind of blending things up. It's kind of giving a soft edge to everything. There are some areas where you want a hard edge, but a lot of this you're going to want a soft edge. You can see by adding this bright orange in some of these areas, it really makes the ear look translucent. Kind of makes it look like some of the light is passing through it. And so when that light passes through it, it just becomes much more saturated. I'm going to soften it up out here a little bit as well. Select some of that orange there, paint it in. All right, let's just take a minute, have a look at this. Look for things that we think could be fixed. I think we could kind of highlight up in here a little bit more. All right, so I think it's looking pretty good. I think now we want to go ahead and add some of our really dark shadows and our really light highlights. So I'm going to grab this really dark reddish color from inside the ear right there. Paint some of that in. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing down here, selecting that color that's almost a black, and you can see it's a cooler color. So our shadows are a little bit cooler in this ear. So deep down in here we have sort of a bluish color for this cavity. I'll select the dark red around it, start using that to blend it in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take my eraser too, and I'm gonna clean up this ear a little bit. Like that. All right, that's looking pretty good. So now let's go ahead, let's select this lightest highlight color, and we can start adding that in a few places now. So switching back to my brush tool, See, we got some up here. So we just want to start light, and then we can start darkening that in and making it more opaque. I can do the same thing right here on this part of the ear. Let's go ahead and color select that so we're making sure that we're getting a little bit more of an accurate color. Alright, then we can go ahead and paint in this highlight right there in the ear. This nice bright highlight out here on this part. Go ahead and squint your eyes so that you can see the shapes and the values a little bit better when you're doing this. And we're going to come back here in a second and really blend all this in. I'm going to grab some of this sort of orangish color real quick and add that in there too before I forget, because I think that's an important part. So you can see between that orange and the white, there's kind of that yellow tinge around it. Alrighty, and then let's go ahead and continue on adding our highlights. So I'm going to go ahead and select these highlights down here, paint those in. You might need to bring your brush size down quite small for this. Alright, let's see. So I think that's looking pretty good. I can probably bring this highlight down a little bit more and thin out this orange on this top ledge of the ear. And maybe darken this and make it more opaque. Go ahead and add a lighter edge right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and start blending some of this together. By just selecting the color, painting with it, then selecting the mix color, and then painting with that. I missed a highlight out here, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that in just right along this back edge of the ear. Then I'm going to continue just blending this in, and we're about done here. Alright, great. I think this ear is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see how it looks. It looks pretty good. Alright, I think that brings us to the end of this lecture. So definitely, if you want to get good at painting people, the best way is to do as many studies as possible. Do studies of the face, but not just the face, but do studies of the different individual parts of the face and the head. So the ears, the mouth, the nose, teeth. Try to paint as much as you can and look at as much reference as you can. And what it's going to do is it's going to start building up your visual library. Not only that, but you're going to have a little portfolio of head studies and face studies that you have done that you can be really proud of. And the more you do it, the more you're just going to see the connections between the colors, the shapes, the form, all of that stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture.